Good morning again, everyone. Hope you had a pleasant coffee break. So let's continue with our meeting today. And the next presentation is from Nesrine Kaaniche from Telecom SudParis. And she'll talk about privacy preserving challenges for urban safety. So please, if you're ready, Nesrine.
So thank you for the introduction, Joe. I will be, for this session, introducing privacy preserving challenges in urban spaces as part of the practice guideline to in smart cities that will be conducted under the Impetus project with the different partners. So for this presentation, I will consider a general use cases, but so that it can be mapped to different scenarios and use case in general usage in smart cities, and then I will follow up with a discussion actually that which raises the different challenges in urban safety. And for my for the first use case, what I would say here. This is an example that I think most of us actually experienced this. I have been, this is really very personal use case or scenario. I have been using in applications. Is it just I'm showing YouTube an example, but it can be any kind of an application or social media applications just to make it a general. I'm just looking for a specific video when I was in Paris area and I got some advertisement. This is the way that some of the videos work. This video was actually very mapped to my location, which was, when I was in France. And then when I have traveled to another area, here I show Auckland because when I used to, travel, when it was possible for me to travel, just because I'm using the same device, and then you see when I looked for the same video using the same application, I've got very different ads which are also mapped to a specific event in Auckland area, New Zealand. This is to say, which raises the question about location data and how it is changed, and if it is actually necessary to collect this data, and to what extent for me as an end user. Okay, please be advised that I will be at somehow discussing the privacy concern from an end user point of view, but also from a service provider point of view, just to see how this balance can be reached at some point and how we can, reach an agreement between both of us. Okay, so this is very common maybe use case that some of us may be aware of it or not, but this context data is very, very valuable. It's more than dealing with the what we call useful data or content data or service content data. This data, which is transited in over the network, is valuable in some point that will help the service provider, an attacker, or any kind of external user to collect that much data on me and will harm our privacy. Again, this kind of data is the data that have been used in in a lot of several several data breaches. I'm just showing some of the mediated one, but it can be kind of a lot that we have experienced rising from the collection of context data or content data from the Amazon, as personal assistant to others that may harm at some point this variety of people, and which actually also has been very well regulated by the GDPR. Here I'm listing GDPR because as the one to we are considering in Impetus and at the European space, but just to let you know that GDPR is not only on the scene, but is actually at some point defining very clearly the boundary of usage of data and actually emphasizing the data minimization principle in order to enhance the privacy by design. Just to follow up, the privacy is not about being only anonymous or hide our identity. Is beyond that. Is actually something is not only for criminals, it's for all of us, because we value our privacy, because it's regulated by the different law text, and because it's actually necessary to have it for the sovereignty of people. So, but the question, or the main challenge is it's very hard to achieve, because it's not only tied to the content data, it's actually a whole complex system that value all the interaction between the different IT services, the different IT component in the full infrastructure. So the more the system is, the bigger the system is, the more complex the privacy to achieve. First, because of this complexity on all the shared data, and second, because privacy doesn't only deal with law and IT, it also considers all the social and psychological interaction of people. And here maybe just in a few the presentation of Yelena, we saw that how the perception of users and awareness of what exists and their interaction with the system can be very different, and this actually have an impact on the success of implementing privacy preserving techniques. Okay, so we do have, from a technical point of view, this will be focused in my presentation in, we do have what we call there exists a kind of variety of techniques that are called privacy enhancing technology that can help in this context, but still we need to have a full assessment of their usage and their adaptation, in order to value their adoption in different contexts. So pets or privacy enhancing technology are needed. They are fast enough to be useful today, but still not generally usable. Why? Because you might ask me why, because we still at some point with different services provider have not reached their expected utility or performances of the system when deploying such kind of technique. Okay, because here we do have that very challenging trade-off between privacy and the utility and performances of the system. So still the question that need always to be assessed at some point. Okay, so in this presentation, I will be providing like a general categorization of pets that we have been conducted and discussed, and then I will follow up with the different challenges that are raised and need to be considered when applying such different technique to one specific scenario. Okay, again, I will be taking an example just to consider three types of services in a bigger, smart cities. Here I'm taking the example of a student at IMT living in Paris. She is using, any kind of web search engine. So here Alice, our user, wants to buy a mouse, a gray mouse, and from this we know that Alice has a profile in the web search engine. So considering this mapping, she will never got a gray mouse response. She will actually have a list of websites selling mouses. In the same context, when Alice is looking for a pleasant area without specifying the location, as I have just shown, so she will get some destination around Paris and some ads related mouse. Here just to to emphasize how those recommendation system might work based on the profile and based on what we can collect from context data on the interaction of the different service provider. Here I will also say this is a nice example of using web search engine to get it much general, but it's actually the same context if we are talking about social media, for example, interaction of users or any kind of a query server, client service kind of services. In the same our user Alice here, she's using some application to monitor some kind of her health situation, and this data will be shared with the service provider, for example, or her activities will be shared on their service providers. This will create at some point some kind of profile which is very, very tight and to her profile. That's okay. Alice will get recommendation, personalized action. This will be very valuable for Alice, but to what extent this service provider can share the data with other entity, is that regulated in an informed a form or not? So here we need to value or assess the difference between inconvenience and having fun, or performances and utility. So it is the right balance. And this, sorry, it might be very small, but from this context, so the categorization that we propose is that for different I hope you can see, for different application or use cases in terms of in the smart cities, here I want to put the accent on pervasive application. So any kind of interaction with the infrastructure and services as a general way, or application in terms of transaction and banking or e-health, or actually geo local social applications. This is a very big categorization, but taking them in three categories. Here, depending on the application and their targets, we categorize three different, different category at the user side. At the user side, that those are the application or the category that the user needs to put in place in order to protect his privacy to reach some level of privacy. So from those, I cite on may have afterward a discussion specifying how each of them work. Anti-tracking, so anti-cookies technique, privacy preserving certification, obfuscation techniques, so encryption and so on, and also data perturbation and all the collaborative computation at the user side. This is here the user needs to apply some heavy computation on his side in order to protect his privacy. So this should be actually allowed now by any service provider, and also being able to be audited. This is one of the points that I want to say just in the legal discussion. And the server side here, this four main categories that might be applied are what we call statistical data disclosures that include anonymization of their data set or applying some differential privacy. Also using self-destruction data system, it does mean that they don't lock all the information. All the information will be removed or purged over the time, and also can use obfuscation and private collaborative communication in order to not to profile users, but also still get the better of their the best of their services. And at the channel side here, we can use any encrypted channel using all the standards, communication standards like TLS, SSL, and so on. So this is mainly the main categories that can be applied at different level on the use cases based on how this should be applied. So this is a very big picture of this taxonomy. Just to not able to, okay. Very quickly, just to recall some of them and see why, what is the main goal, for example, to use anti-tracking tool and how this can be supported at server side. Because what we need to understand is, okay, that that's great to use those tools, because it helps to protect our privacy and helps not profiling us. But how this will impact the service provider? Can we still get the service by the end, or to get all the objectives of the service? So okay, inter-tracking help to prevent the service and to trace Alice, for example, here, but at some point those cookies will enable, will destroy one of the functionality of the server. That's why I said that at this should be supported by the service provider. Okay, I'm just sticking this very quickly, not to stick on time. This will be, cookies can be any kind of cookies or fingerprinting or ad blocker. So this is a very large categories of techniques. From the server side technique, this what maybe value in at Impetus, because we have a large number of service and applications. One of the technique that maybe would be considered by our services is the use of database anonymization or anonymization. Okay, this will enable companies, enterprise to process anonymized data independently from GDPR requirement, because the data will not be recognizable and cannot be linked to the user. And one of the technique is here, I'm just showing what we call key anonymity. Is, for example, here I have a data set instead of which is anonymized at some point where I only have identifier or numbers or random ID, but with the specific information, personal information of the user. So I will create what we call generalized data sets that enable me to use it as a service provider, that enable me to use this data and to do all my analysis for this big data without being very specific. Okay, and now it's very tough work here, and to find the best way to create this generalized data set, not being like identifiable at some point, because sometimes here you may say that I don't know, people who are on the age of 20s, in the 20s, all have the same disease. So at some point I can identify people, and this is one of also some of the mediated work that have been conducted at some point by the MIT, where we can identify and match between health data and some open public data set. Okay, so still have drawbacks now, because we have complexity, we still have inference attack, and we do have full trust of our remote server, but our adversary here, we don't consider the service provider of our adversary, we just value the privacy of people just to in Impetus use case scenario. Okay, so I'll finish by the two slides about some technical challenges to implement PET. So what we need to do, okay, having all this big picture on what kind of category can be applied at which site and for which application, we need also to consider that we do have challenges regarding the implementation of privacy preserving. More than the performances is that we need also to have what we call auditing tool. Here I'm respecting the recommendation by the GDPR, but it's actually in general use of IT systems. We need to have or to implement the transparency and get auditing tool to be addressed, or to auditing functions to be addressed by the system, and this have not been addressed very well, and this also one of the things that need to be considered when assessing the privacy or the privacy preservation of the system. Okay, here I'm putting some of the example works that can help to do that, but still something that is very challenging to put in place, having full privacy, good performances and auditing. In the same way, the huge question is really to have a massive collection of data and also to preserve privacy while getting better in performances, especially for those are relying on AI, which is a big part what we are considering here on Impetus. So we need to be very careful when assessing the anonymity of performances. So there exists a lot of work, but still, crypto, for example, methods, but here we need to consider the efficiency and the quality of experience of the end user. Final point is here we need, as well as for the collection, to need good processing or lightweight processing of those for resource constrained devices, especially speaking, if we will be implementing this at the user side. But I think our work is more focused on the service provider. So this the processing, we do have much more computation capacity, which helps actually to resolve some of the challenges and the direction that we want to take as a practical advice. Okay, we'll finish by those two, just to emphasize again the work that we do on in considering data privacy, and also the connection with all the ethical and legal issues. All the technical IT is a great that provides nice results and objective, but should be actually that we always consider what the regulation says, and that should be under their framework, which at some point, sometimes those are very, very general, and we cannot actually see the boundaries of that. And final thing is wanted to say is also about the social and economic challenges, because the perception and the social interaction user experience are also to be considered while talking about data privacy. Is not only an IT or a technical issue, it's a whole complex ecosystem that we need to consider. Okay, so in conclusion, for all what I said, it is important to emphasize that all of those challenges, we should not consider every IT system, every system as a standalone. We need to consider it as a whole system. So different privacy technology, sometimes some of the user side and other service provider side to be combined to ensure an acceptable level of privacy. Say acceptable level, but still not something that we can assess as much, because it involves different points. And here, so several solutions that we are considering to be deployed at different level in order to reach some kind of balance between privacy, utility, and ethics and fairness especially by the usage of AI algorithm here in urban space, and what are considered as well in Impetus scenarios. And okay, thank you for attention. I'm here to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Nesrine. Does anyone have questions, either in the chat or in the Q&A? So if I may, Nesrine, I would ask you a question.
Yeah.
Very early in your presentation, you showed us some pictures from newspaper headlines saying that there's been a huge data breach and so on. Is there a danger that in some ways, in the minds of people, the battle is already lost? People have read these headlines and they think this happens no matter what. No matter what GDPR and technology, these leaks seem to happen anyway. I mean, do you think there's a danger there that people will just give up when they see these very dramatic headlines?
It's a very, very good question first.
Maybe a depressing question.
It's not an IT question. Now you see, even though I have, not that much understanding, it's more about the human factor of privacy. To see what are their perception and what is the awareness of the. Even though some people will give up, I have been. I participated in some kind of survey in this way, that in order to consider what are their perception in such kind of situation. But even though we need to actually strengthen the technical part in order to provide the privacy, while considering, this is what we try to do, and while considering what we call vulnerable users that will actually at some point introduce some vulnerability and so weaknesses to the system. So it's something that we need to deal with in order to reach this. But yeah.
Okay. I see that Sandro has his hand up. We have time for one quick question, Sandro, if you want.
Yes, thank you, Nesrine. you was mentioning privacy in the application of artificial intelligence. You never mentioned the words like bias and fairness. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Actually, I said very quickly by the end and the conclusion, actually. So biases does exist. Okay, so this is something that that we need to deal with, and actually something that I also want to mention, privacy techniques may raise the biases, privacy technique applied to AI, if I say this in a general way. But here, what we are considering, I'm talking about the use cases that are, I mean, how we use AI algorithm in Impetus. It's more collecting data, processing this data, and somehow applying some anonymization or some statistical data disclosure techniques. So the work will be actually over the database itself, or what we have as a content, and then apply the AI algorithm. This way will help actually in the pre-processing to consider this issue. I will not consider the ethics parts, but it's actually something that needs to be discussed, and we are I think this is something I'm not involved to, that provides some advice on those issues.
Okay, thanks, Nesrine. I think we have to close it there because of the time. So thank you very much, Nesrine.
Thanks for you.
And now let's move on to the next presentation, which is going to be led by my colleague, Martina Ragosta, on validating sensitive technologies in realistic operational environments. I've understood that perhaps, Martina, you might involve some other people too at some point, but I'm sure you'll explain that to us as we go. So please, Martina.
Thank you, Joe, for the introduction. I don't have your beautiful tie, but I'm wearing the most concrete outcome of the project so far. So our wonderful T-shirt, and I'm proud of it. So the previous presentation laid the foundation of our research project, our research activities, while in this presentation we will focus on the concrete and the realistic application of these technologies in the operational environments. This is the consortium that you have already seen several times, and the two, I would like to remove this. Okay, the two cities, the smart cities that are our partner in the project are Oslo and in Norway, and Padova in Italy. And the validation activities are divided into three main phases. The phase one, that's the one that we have already carried out in the past month, is related to the initial trials and the technical and acceptance testing of the tools on non-live system. Then there will be the second phase, where we will deal with a larger data collection from live system, in particular focusing on the analysis, but not on the intervention. And the last one will be the live test with simulated physical and cyber attacks. So as you can see, these three different phases deals with a different level of realism, from the very low to the real simulation. And in this presentation and in the next one with Oslo partners, we will try to give you an overview of what has been done in the acceptance pilot. As Joe said at the beginning, the acceptance pilots were the first occasion to test the tools and to start to deal with the sensitive aspects of our project, try to balance potential conflict needs to collect, transform, and share data with the protection of data privacy, and managing the processes of organizing these huge events and very demanding events for the cities, for example, like the closure of a square for the exercise. These activities required a lot of preparatory activities. We asked and we involved all the national and local authorities for getting the right approvals, because as you have understood from the previous presentation, we care a lot about ethics, privacy, and safety. We involved in the scenario definition the relevant stakeholders and the COSEC members. We defined together the different roles and responsibilities, not only from the technical point of view, but also from the organizational point of view. And for each tools in both cities, the technological partners were there to set up this tool and to prepare and involve the end user through presentation, through some training session, in order to let them to understand and to get familiar with the tool. The first acceptance pilot was in Oslo at the beginning of November, and after 1 year of working in remote, we had also the opportunity to meet with most of all the partners and to run the initial test. This is one of the pictures of the SOC operators in Oslo, and as you can see, the SOC operator is wearing these headsets for assessing his workload, stress, and emotional workload. And the screen on his left is the screen where he can check real time these different indicators and also get some alerts. Then for each tool at the end of the test, we organized with the operators dedicated debriefing, focusing essentially on usability and operational aspects, and we collected preliminary feedback to improve not only the tools but also to do better during the acceptance pilot in Padova, despite the time was very, very short between the two activities. And I focused in the previous picture to the headset because I would like to use this tool to explain a little bit better what we learned in Oslo and what we changed and improved in Padova. This is true also for several tools that we have tested in Oslo. So when we talked with the operators about his experience with the tool, he said that according to usability, in his opinion, it was easy to use and comfortable. It was also easy to understand the different indicators and alerts. And according to his opinion, it would work well for larger events, for example, demonstration in the square and so on. Regarding operational aspects, the operator suggested us that it may require some new procedures and also some new competencies or additional competencies and a little bit more experience regarding the manager standpoint. And he suggested us to try these tools with more operators and also to test it also with the supervisor in the SOC rooms. So then after 1 month, less than 1 month, we had the opportunity to have the second face-to-face meeting in Padova, where despite the COVID restriction, most of the partners were able to attend. We were able to take into consideration and to implement mainly all the feedback and the lessons learned in Oslo, and also to test some tool together. I would like to share with you this nice video. I just, can you see the video now? This is a Piazza dei Signori in Padova, where we had the opportunity to test different scenarios with several volunteers for the police, the Carabinieri, Protezione Civile, and all the participants were informed, and all them signed the consent form. So we took care again of the ethics issues. And here you can see how they were escaping from the square due to people fighting or unexpected events, like, for example, the closure of one of the exits, or with some different scenarios that we will see in a few seconds. So if you see the umbrella and the other things, because the weather was not so nice in Padova, while in Oslo we had very sunny days, but also because this was useful to test the weapon detection tool and the false alarm. You see our project coordinator behind the signs with the media that were present for asking questions, because these events also raise public interest. And this is almost the end of the video, but if you pay attention, you can see this guy with a fake gun, because also this was one of the tests, how people can escape in case of an attack. I showed you what happened in the square, but at the same time, we were at the operation center with two operators wearing the same technological headset of the previous one. You can see in the screen of the operator the square and what was happening in the square, and the supervisor that were coordinating together how to intervene. This is also another short video. Here you can see how they were coordinating, and also the two screens, because this is one of the screens for the supervisor and the distribution of work and the supervisor. We were able to implement this in Padova. In addition, we were able to test the same tool in the intelligence operation room in Padova with different operators, and together with the weapon detection tool and the PTRO that you will see in the next presentation. So we learned a lot during these two acceptance pilots. We understood that these tools are targeted for different users. They can provide a different alarm, and also for the platform, we should think to different widgets for sharing the information with the different operators. We need to take into account the impact of these tools on the operation, and also try to use this tool for enhancing collaboration between the different agencies and the different operators. Now I would like to let the floor to our partners from Città di Padova, from Comune di Padova, Bruno Bonomini and Giulia Canilli, because with them I would like to discuss how smart cities can manage both physical security and cybersecurity aspects, and also how the technologies that we are providing can ensure that they are developed for the benefit of society. So, Bruno, if you want, the floor is yours, and I can pass to this.
Morning, everybody. Thank you, Martina. So, as Martina said, during the last week, the Impetus Consortium undertook the so-called acceptance pilot in Padova, that you know is close to Venice, just to better clarify where this city is. So with the aim to make a step ahead, comparing what we undertook in Oslo, we tested all the tools, but in front of the city. So with two main objectives, let me say. We would like to involve more the local stakeholders. And of course, as already shared, we definitely want to collect feedbacks for further developments. And during the acceptance pilot in Padova, we involved more than 150 people in different locations, as Martina showed you earlier. We undertook some of the tests combined, so with more than one tool tested in the same time. And for us, the challenge has been to let our audience, so authorities and users, but also media and citizens, so the city, to understand the potential of the Impetus platform and the Impetus tool. So to let you understand better what the potential could be, let me use the same example I used during the introduction in Padova and compare a danger in Piazza dei Signori, so the square you have already seen in the video, without Impetus and with the Impetus. So Martina, are you okay? No, sorry, I was there is a voice. Okay. So without Impetus, if there is a person holding a gun in Piazza dei Signori, probably someone has to notice the danger. He or she makes an alert call. He or she describes the subject to the operator. And then the operator receives the information and transfers it to those who have to intervene by voice, so with a call, probably with a mobile phone or a radio. So the patrol instead have to intervene quickly, following what learned from the operators. So Martina, please. So in this case, during this step, there are many things that can be a matter of lack of information and lack of time. So as you can see, there are plenty of questions. So do this step that I described all work? Do all happen? So there are many questions, as you can see in the right part of the screen. Instead, with Impetus, there are many steps to be undertaken. So the Impetus directly detects the potential danger. The operators confirm the danger, so it is not a false positive. The operator then transfer directly with just a click the image to the colleague asked to intervene, and these people directly receive the position and the images of the subject detected. So comparing the two slides, Martina, go ahead. Here we have just to click and no possibility to have a lack of information and a more precise and less time involved. So for concluding, I leave the floor to Giulia.
Thank you. Thanks to Impetus, we should have real-time information and alerts, and these alerts should arrive to the SOC operator passively. I mean, we don't need citizens calling the police, and we shouldn't need policemen on the field calling their colleagues. Then we should have a greater completeness of information and a better coordination between those called to intervene that are, at least in Italy, the different police forces, and for example, ambulance and firefighters and so on. So thanks to all these things, which are the expected value. We expect interventions without external signaling, a reduced intervention time, and most importantly, more effective intervention. If we can go, thank you very much. So what do we have to do to achieve these goals and this added value? And with we, I mean the whole consortium, so the partners and the cities are the stakeholders of the city, actually. We need to do other tests together. We need to share feedback, ideas, and impression. And we need to implement the tools and platform. These two last points are really related, since we will develop in the appropriate way the tools and the platform just if we keep on collecting the feedbacks of the end users and taking into consideration, of course, the advice of the technical partners. So we should solve together any issue connected to the data management, and also, and this is very important, we should think about the different operating modes, since the introduction of new technologies will bring new operating models with it. That's it for me.
Thanks a lot, Giulia and Bruno. Before moving to the question and answer, I would like to ask you a question, and you can go just to menti.com and use the code 3939927. And the question is very simple. What is according to your opinion, what is the most relevant aspect to address security issues in public space? So please start to vote so we can see real time the results. Okay, so yeah, just to show you the correct answer. Let's see if it works. For us, actually, there isn't a right answer. We need to take into consideration all these three different aspects, as Matthieu, since the beginning of this conference, said, because all of them should be carefully taken into account in order to develop a technology that will be ethical and useful for the end users. So you can follow us on our project website, on Twitter, on LinkedIn. And now, if you have a question, just ask. And thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you very much, Martina, Bruno, Giulia. Okay, I have a question. You were talking about, in doing this validation, to some extent you were evaluating the technology and how well it works, but you were also evaluating how it fits into the working processes that people would be using. And just based roughly on these work that you did in Oslo and Padova, and the lessons you learned, was the balance between them equal, or was one much more dominant than the other? Did you spend most of your time looking at bugs in the hardware, the software, or most of your time figuring out who should use this, when should they use it? Or was it all of these things, all mixed together?
you know, this was our initial, in Oslo in particular, was the very initial test. And I think on the technological side, we didn't have so many issues. At least all the partners were able to deal with expected and unexpected issues, to do bugs and these other things. And when we talked with the operators, they were really interesting in understanding the impact on the processes and on the procedure, because for them this is the main relevant part. But also they were really able to provide useful feedback for all the three different aspects. And we saw some progresses from Oslo to Padova. So we are very, very positive for the next validation activities. And then in the next presentation also, Oslo will provide additional feedback on the resilience and how the experience has been in Oslo. I don't know if just Bruno want to conclude with some sentences from your side.
Thank you again. Yes, I do agree with the survey. I mean, the three pillars of our project are all more important, are really equally important, but there are for sure some challenges related to processes. I mean, because changing is always painful, and for everybody, for a so strict structure like a public administration will be even more complicated. So our challenge here for sure in the next months will be to help the local stakeholder to understand how to adopt the solution we are developing, but also to how to really change the processes they are used to.
Okay, thank you, Bruno. I think we have to move on because of the time, but I just want to make a remark about the survey asking people to say whether technology, ethics, or processes is the most important. I want to complain because it's an impossible question to answer. It's like asking someone what was the best thing about the meal, the food or the wine. The food wouldn't be good without the wine wouldn't be good without the food. You need both of them for a good meal, and you need processes and ethics and technology in our solution. So it's not really fair to ask which one is the most important. But so I voted for technology because I knew it would be the loser, and I like to support the loser. So,
but you know, I always ask very hard questions. This is my role in the project.
And I always complain as well, so that we're just fulfilling our normal roles. So, okay, thanks anyway, and let's move on now. So the next presentation is called Public Safety and Smart Cities, a Transitional Resilience Perspective. And the authors of this are Olav Grøtan from SINTEF, with Andrea Bjarkø also from SINTEF, Osman Ibrahim and Gjetrang from Oslo City. And my understanding is that Olav is going to do the presentation, but I'm not completely sure. So we'll wait and see who appears on the screen.
Thank you, Joe. So we will be presenting the content of the article of Public Safety in Smart Cities, a Transactional Resilience Perspective. So in this article, you will find several concepts which is used in the work in Impetus Work Package 6, Platform in Operation. So I am Gjetrang from City of Oslo, and we'll be presenting the perceptions from the City of Oslo, and Olav will go more into details of the article. As cities, we need to prepare for an infinite range of risks. We know that something will happen, but we don't know how, when, or where. As a part of the city's responsibilities, it is to identify and analyze risk factors for the city and its inhabitants. The insecurities in the large and complex systems that a city is causes a need to be resilient. As in the case of the pandemic, we planned for a pandemic, but not this pandemic. When plans can't be made for every conceivable or unforeseen challenge, functionality may be past its ability to operate. We will need to be prepared for it through resilient measures so we can adapt to the challenges and create alternate ways of functioning. This may be improvising solutions beyond our plans, such as finding acceptable degraded modes of operations or alternate resource management than what we originally planned for to recover from the impact. Security operation centers will continuously be developing along with the threat pictures and new technologies. SOCs are operating in environments where their primary duties are to discover and to handle events which will often have a higher risk of being challenging for various functionality. It's vital to protect their ability to operate normally, while also increasing their competence and capacity to handle the constantly changing threat pictures and the tools that they have to perform their duties. When SOCs are affected by events, their operations may be suffering, and the competence of the operators become the primary contingency measures we have to handle the event. When adding capacity to SOCs with new technological tools, it will change the way that they operate. It will create new dependencies, or perhaps even removing capabilities and redundancies. So you may inadvertently increase or create new vulnerabilities, which makes it important to secure the operator's competence and ability to handle these challenges. So creating a resilient SOC with operators capable of adapting to situations outside of normal contingency plans will require a resilient organization capable of supporting the operator's needs and decision making. There are several factors such as mandate, understanding of intention, boundaries, and training, which can help to develop a sustainable adaptive capacity. In Impetus, we address these challenges by creating guidelines founded in concepts of resilience engineering. For the city of Oslo, it can be challenging to create resilient operational models. We provide several vital societal functions and other services to citizens, while we also work to increase safety and security in urban spaces and public buildings. Our SOCs within these various functionalities will have their own local needs in cybersecurity, urban security, site security, or security of supply chains. Our way of organizing what resources we dispose and responsibilities we have may be different from other cities in Norway or in other countries because of the context that they operate in. To the best of our abilities, we take this into account when we in Impetus are developing operational guidelines. In our approach, when developing these guidelines, we will actively use findings and results from our pilots in Impetus, the operational experience from the pilot cities, Oslo and Padova, in addition to the experience across the COSAC network and the Impetus consortium. For organizations adopting Impetus in their operations, it will be vital that the guidelines provide the ability to create resilient organizations based on local needs. So I'll leave the floor to my colleague, Olav Grøtan.
Thank you. Yeah, as Simon said, that resilience now, the smart city resilience is a result of efforts from many contexts, many sources. But talking very generically now, not from Oslo context necessarily, I will say that first of all, we need a kind of typology to understand the different sources of resilience in terms of types. Here are 3 types that we use in this paper. And because as also Sandro showed us before the break, that resilience is always often projected as a kind of curve. There's a function that loses its value and then is restored. But resilience is the underlying ability to uphold that curve. Resilience is not synonymous with a curve. So here we discriminate between three sources of three types of sources of regions of resilient performance. Very fashionable typology, theory A, B, and C. That was the best I could come up with, so to say. But theory A says that resilience is an intrinsic part of the function or the curve on which the effect of resilient performance is projected. That is, it can be a just sheer redundancy in a function. It could be a fault-tolerant ICT system, or it could be a feedback control loop. It can also be in this smart city resilience context a kind of common repository or coordinated plan to use to share resources. But theory A is not the most interesting in this context, but it will be ingrained in also theory B and C. And theory B means that you have a repository of organized and supportive resources which are designated to uphold a specific curve through different phases, through a phase-oriented contingency, which means that this type of resilience, this type of resilient performance is a result of risk management, of emergency preparedness, of business continuity plans, and so on. So they are designated, oriented towards different phases here. While theory C is about the underlying principles and conditions for sustained resilient capabilities. They are drawing on the finite-based resources. They are dealing with complexity, emergence, and brittleness. And the main distinction here is that in the theory C source of resilience, it's about being poised to adapt and without having a blueprint. You are actually preparing for a situation in which you have not expected. You are really surprised, and when it happens, you are already on the brink on what you are prepared for. So you have to manage being on the boundary of what you are prepared for. So when we then look at the actual adaptations to a resilient performance, so to say, the actual adaptations which you might derive from theory B point of view, they are less interesting in the theory C point of view, because then it's more about, we are more interested in the underlying adaptive capacity that makes it possible for adaptations to emerge according to the situation. And this kind of resilience, this kind of adaptive capacity needs to relate to the underlying resources that are available, the priorities and the policies of this organization. And talking very broadly, theory C is what kind of resembles this idea of resilience engineering mostly. Okay, and then also Sandro also showed us that resilience has many sources. It involves the whole city, not all the city, the community, the people, the technology, society at large. So what we try to do in this nexus model to say that we try to focus on some areas, some sources of resilience that are relevant, for instance, for the smart city resilience. And we do this by this nexus model, which is combining different sources. And these sources are characterized by being located someplace at a locus, and they have an objective, which may be connected, associated with theory B or theory C. And what we have here is first and foremost, which is maybe the most usual way of talking about resilience, is a kind of enhanced preparedness or towards disruptions, meaning theory B, which this is rooted in a risk and crisis management process in aiming for enhancing the preparedness towards what is anticipated. But on the other side, from a theory C or resilience engineering point of view, this kind of type of robustness, which it actually seems like from that point of view, is fragile, because you prepare for something and you are prepared for that, but when something else happens and the system has migrated into some other modes of functioning, you actually can be taken by surprise, and you are robust yet fragile. Therefore, you also need the sustained adaptive capacity, which is located in a complex socio-technical system, while the enhanced preparedness is located in a risk management process involving other people. So, and we can also then extend this, which I don't have the time to go into now, but there's also a management and organizing process point of view here, which is responsible at a more distance to kind of calibrate the resources and look ahead and make strategies and see to that the balance between the two on the upper side is proper. And resilience just neither need to be originated from a organized point system. Resilience also resides in community, by citizens, by civic understanding and efforts to contribute to this. And they have some other objectives, which is maybe more in the long term. So this is the using the theory A, B, and C concept as a typology. We put this together into this nexus model, saying that resilience emerges, it's eclectic and it's polycentric, and it emerges from, for instance, these four, and we concentrate further on the two upper ones, because they are the most interesting for the first step. We need to develop a kind of coexistence between enhanced preparedness and sustained adaptive capacity. And this discriminating between these are very important. It's very important. It's, as Wildavsky stated in 1988, that resilience is needed as an intellectual and instrumental counterweight to what he called the obsession with prediction. And also Joaquin Sutcliffe said that the ability to cope with the unexpected requires a different mindset than to anticipate its occurrence. As Simon mentioned, in Norway, the prime minister at the time this spring said, for the pandemic, we were prepared for the pandemic, but not that pandemic. And that statement captures this distinction between these two ways of creating resilience, because you can create as far as you can imagine how a pandemic will look like, and you can create the rules, and you can even devise some directions for modifying or bending the rule. And you might even conceive that somebody have to stop, act beyond the rule and say something about that, but you also need to say stop in time. You cannot take this kind of measure further than this. That you can do. But when these things happens, when this pandemic happens, you need some other type of resilience, which is the sustained adaptive capacity, which makes it possible for you to have trained and to be able to operate on conditions that you haven't prepared for, that are beyond your preparedness. And you can also then extend this bridge later on towards the lower two parts of this nexus model. So we can use also here, we are conceiving the use of a training concept, which we are called training for operational resilience capabilities. You could come back to the how this is at a later time. Now I'll just talk about how we can use it. But there is a digital version of this that we are going to use, probably. But I tried to mark out with green and blue here how this kind of maps to these two types of resilience. We need worst case scenarios. They need to be more acquainted with those, because they will challenge them in many areas. So they will kind of entail high uncertainty in the chain of consequence, and that is something you need to explore. So in order to explore it before it happens, you need to train on it. So you have to stage some training scenarios that goes beyond what you actually have prepared for. And this means that the operational concepts will be challenged in a systematic way, in different ways. So you can over and again try to explore or encounter situations that are beyond what your official preparations are about. And then you try to feed back your experience from that and try to modify and try to enhance your preparations as good as possible. But you cannot realize how far this can go until you actually train on, see how it propagates through your city. And that is also one of the rationales for using sustained adaptive capacity training, which means that you're placing the trainees in a situation in which is on the edge of what they actually can manage, and then you add some additional stress, which you see how they can deal with. Yeah, So this is something that we can also, and that we envisage to be using in T63 on degraded modes of operation, that we can challenge the operational centers, the SOCs, to say, this is what you have, and all of a sudden you don't have this, you have just a reduced repertoire, and then something happens. How will you deal with that? So all in all, by using this type of training, we can develop various kind of resilience capabilities and integrate them better across organizational context. That's the main achievement by doing this way. Simon, I think you have to conclude for Oslo.
Yeah. As Olav has presented, these concepts are very important for our approach to how we will develop the guidelines in Impetus. The concepts give us a better understanding of addressing needs when we need to change, to adapt, to work with these new technologies in our operations. So we look forward to dive into the concepts and the challenges in our development. And if you're interested in reading this further, you can find the article, Public Safety in Smart Cities, a Transactional Resilience Perspective. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Tor Olav and Simon. Does anyone have some questions in the chat or in the Q&A? Okay, I would like to ask a question about time scale. So Impetus is a project which lasts for 2.5 years. And you mentioned, both of you, enhancing preparedness and doing training and things like this. And these seem to me to be the things that don't happen overnight, or even within a month, or even within a year, or even within a decade before they have a big effect. Could you say something about timescale and how it relates to all of this? The kind of changes you're talking about here, and compare that with the timescale of Impetus. Does it fit?
I can say that from our perspective, as you say, this is something that has a long time scale. You could perhaps even address it to culture that you need to develop. This is a informative guideline which is supposed to develop understanding so that you can adapt to your local needs and work on your organizations in a long-term perspective outside of the Impetus timescope.
I
could add from a kind of more generic point of view that I think that the enhanced preparedness process is something that should be really coupled on the risk and crisis management. That's the idea, because that is something that presumably goes on and on, and so you can use the scenarios and the assumptions that are embedded in that, and use them and challenge them by training on sustained adaptive capacity. And I think if we have a relevant example in Norway now for the pandemic, because in 2 days the government actually decided that there's almost a U-turn in how we are actually dealing with the Omicron variant of the virus. So I think the preparation that you had in place, that were kind of a prolongation of what we have done all this autumn, all of a sudden took a different direction. And that could be something that you could kind of rehearse on in advance. You could say that, what if another variant of the virus shows up and the government actually tightens their grip on things, and the regulations all of a sudden are more strict? What do we do then? So that's a kind of surprise event that you could use sustained adaptive capacity training to challenge, to say, okay, we have no plans for it. What would we do actually if we had to encounter that kind of situation? Then you can create some experiences, some lines of thought that you can take back in your preparation.
So if
But
I
I'm
understand
not
you,
speaking. Yeah, I'm not speaking for Oslo here. That's speaking very generically. Simon has to answer for Oslo.
yeah. But if I understand you, you're saying that, you know, some long-term planning and preparation can enable short-term responses when something actually happens.
Yeah. Okay.
But on a similar dimension, though, that so some of the technology that Impetus is providing, for example, the weapon detection tool, is something that I could imagine, if it works the way it's meant to, could have a fairly immediate impact on how working processes happen. Just, you know, if it's adopted and works, then that could happen quickly.
That could happen.
Yeah.
So you can prepare for that, but you can also then think of the situation that you are prepared for that, you get accustomed to having that tool, and all of a sudden you don't have the tool. What do you do then?
Yes, yes. Okay, I see Sandro has his hand up. Do you have a quick question? We're into lunch break now, just so everyone's aware. So do you have a quick question, Sandro?
Yeah, thank you. It's not a question, it's a comment. I fully agree with Thor and Jan. And I remember that when I was a student, one of my professors used to say, tool is only a tool. And that is still valid. Organization is the most difficult aspect with resilience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sandro. I think with regard to the time, I think we should close the session here for the lunch break. And we come back again then at 2 o'clock we come back, and then we're going to have a technical presentation about the Impetus platform from Radu from Iveco. So see you all at 2 o'clock then, and enjoy your lunch. Thank you.
Thanks.